today we are very lucky to have Dr. Zahara Sundermeyer on today's Boss Bitch Radio episode talking about hormones and fat loss, and likely a lot of other things in between. She likely works with some of you already today that are here on this call. If you feel comfortable dropping a me, go ahead and do that in the chat box. And that way, in case someone here maybe has questions, if you're comfortable sharing your experience, that's what this community is about. So this topic is important because the work that naturopathic doctors do goes beyond what you're used to with traditional healthcare. I know the impact that it's had on my life. I know the impact it's had on a lot of our clients' lives. So I wanted to really focus on diving into all these topics today. So without further ado, I'm going to shut my trap and let Dr. Sundermeyer take the floor and just introduce herself before we dive into all the questions. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always nice to come on a fun platform and just kind of get good information out there and be able to really communicate with people that don't know what naturopathic medicine is, because I feel like it's such a, oh, that's a holistic doctor, or, oh, that's a homeopath. But really the cool thing about naturopathic medicine, which you're already aware of, Diane, is that we walk the line of that holistic homeopathy and integrative, or I should say conventional medicine, so that we say we integrate, or we're integrative physicians. Functional medicine doctors is also another really great term. But the cool thing about it is that I do the herbs, I help the cortisol, I balance things out, but I can also do the hormones and supplement the hormones and read the labs appropriately for where your body is, but also where your body needs or you want it to be. And then, of course, negate a lot of the side effects that could come along the way, or, support what things you're looking to accomplish. So I do think that that's a wonderful thing. I've been working with hormones now for almost 10 years. Started out with some really cool studies and, just a lot of cool seminars. And then it just you guys kind of took it over for me. I was always told in medical school that, as a naturopathic doctor, you can find your niche, but the people that find you will really make you what you are. And it's really what I've become as a women's medicine doctor. And then, of course, the really cool thing is this morning, I also finalized a pregnancy test for a patient that did some preconception care. And now she is 4 weeks and 5 days pregnant. So I have some just like fun stuff happening in my life. It's so cool because we just did her appointment about a month ago, and I said, "Yep, go get it. You're ready. Your hormones say you're doing well." And her hormones,
get after it.
She did well. She's 4 weeks from our last appointment, so she did beautiful.
Amazing, amazing.
So it's a really fun form of medicine, and I'm really thankful that I found it. So
I love that.
Just running with it.
Yeah. So diving into the topic, because I know that's why a lot of people are here today.
Yep, I see all the questions.
Yes, is fat loss. So in your experience, what is the number one, I guess, key factor that poses a challenge when women are trying to do all the things, right? They're doing the diet, they're doing the exercise, nothing's working. What do you think is the key factor that is preventing them from fat loss?
Usually the biggest key factor in today's society is a lot of estrogen imbalance, I would say, with a secondary undertone of too much imbalance in cortisol, for sure. So estrogen is this really interesting hormone, and it's really our primary hormone. It's our primary female sex hormone, where men, their primary sex hormone is testosterone. And it's so interesting because the unfortunate thing in today's society is that we're bombarded with so many chemicals that amplify estrogen in our system. And I read this really cool article that kind of talked about how it's they're the party crashers. And I think that was the coolest description of a xenoestrogen, or of a exogenous estrogen that mimics estrogen. They act like party goers, they do all the things that the party goers do, but they weren't invited. And I was like, that is the best analogy I've ever heard, because it's always a cool way to describe, well, estrogen is everywhere, unfortunately, not just in what our ovaries make, but also in the candles we light for the holiday season, or in those really cool pine cones that are scented, but we don't know where the scent comes from, right? So I feel like today we're bombarded with a lot of artificial presence of things or just our environmental pollutants that can really impact the way estrogen is mediating the way our hormones and our lipolysis really should be. And lipolysis, of course, is fat breakdown. So we're bombarded with this awesome estrogen that our body makes, and then we have this external factor that's playing a role in the way our body is responding. So I do think that that's probably one of the biggest issues today is just environmental toxicities associated with estrogen. In women, it is actually pretty significant of how it can impact our distribution of fat. I know a lot of people have heard like, oh, I go into menopause and my fat distribution changes. And the really interesting thing is it's not that it changes, it's that estrogen no longer can contribute to the lipolysis or the breakdown of healthy fat as it once did, because the numbers are no longer where they were.
So meaning they're too high.
Either they're way too high, and that's obviously one of the big things that does start as women enter their 40s is progesterone levels decline because we don't ovulate as efficiently as we once did. No ovulation means not the best progesterone levels, right? So we might have great normal estradiol levels, and I've told women this over and over, your estradiol is not necessarily the issue. It's that because progesterone is not supporting it, now you're having the uncompeted estrogen or the estrogen dominance, of what a lot of people utilize that term, but it's not necessarily estrogen dominance. So it could be an estrogen deficiency. But then there is the phase where estrogen is really high and we can't quite figure out how to support or where they're getting all of this estrogen production in. And obviously I think it's those party crashers.
Okay.
Best word I've ever heard of for
Yeah.
for exogenous estrogen. So I'm having fun with that one recently.
I bet. Yeah. Now I'm sure this is a multifaceted approach at tackling these
Totally.
issues.
Yep.
However, if you have to take like 3 steps back in terms of preventative with lifestyle or environmental factors, can you
Mm-hmm.
give us a few tips for that? And also with that issue, what are the next steps when it comes to working with like a naturopath? What are some things that you usually deploy for those types of struggles?
Absolutely. So obviously the first thing, unfortunately, would be is, no fun scents in the home. I love essential oils if you can trust the company and you know that they're properly diffusing or distilling the essential oils. There's a lot of companies that use chemical distillation, which means you're
Mhm.
giving yourself more chemicals, which is what you're trying to avoid with essential oils. And that kind of makes me sad because it's, that's a whole other ball game. But so just be aware you're sourcing. And then I would say more than anything, the biggest thing that you have to really focus on is probably what you guys preach a lot is proper balance in protein, fiber. When in doubt, I feel like fiber is like the missing link for so many people because we're so good at protein, we get our fat in, we're going into ketosis or we're eating paleo, but I don't think anybody gets enough fiber. And there's some really great research about how fiber can bind bile, and bile, which is released by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, helps with digestion of fatty acid. But bile also recycles like 95% of lipids and toxins every day. So things that you can do to help bind bile will actually help you naturally detoxify. So it's a really cool new adventure of medicine that I've been kind of utilizing more recently because you learn new things, and I'm the first to say I've learned something new, let's use
Mhm.
it. And anything that you can do to help support the liver manage everything that you're bringing into it, everything that you're breathing into it, and then of course everything that it's meant to eliminate. It's like, think about your home. How many times do you put the trash in the trash can in the bathroom, trash in the trash can in the kitchen, trash in maybe your office? And then all of those trashes fill up, and eventually they've got to go out to the bigger trash can outside of the house. But what if they can't get to the trash can outside of the house, or you're lazy, or oh, I'll get it tomorrow?
Mhm.
That's kind of the same thing with phase 1 liver metabolism. And so that's how we get our body out. And so you kind of have to just think it as good housekeeping. How can I keep my house, right? This system that I keep trying to maintain for good longevity and feeling good. How do I keep my house healthy? And how do I not only get the trash out to the side of the house where I have my bigger, trash can, but I also need to get it out to the road. And that's, you know, those are super important things. And obviously there's nutrients that you can do. We've been using a lot of TUDCA and carnitine to help with just liver support. But as always, the old faithful DIM, diindolylmethane, and indole 3-carbinol, which are brassica family nutrients. I mean, those are probably the two best things that you could do right now to help just natural phase one trash from the house to the side of the house and then out over to the street, or however your trash system works.
Yeah. When it comes to DIM, is this something that you feel people can add in even if they're not aware of their hormone levels? It's something to just support.
I love if you feel like you're noticing more fatigue during that PMS phase, like you're about 10 to 7 days before the period's about to start, and you're like, man, my breasts hurt. I'm a little on edge. I feel like little things are starting to perturb me.
Who
Or
can
just
say that
eat
that's them? Hi, me. I cried for like 4 days before my period.
that right there. That
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
crying 4 days before your period.
Hmm.
Totally. I cried the other day, and I'm right in that window. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh man, it's totally time to check my hormones.
Hmm.
Um, like I cried at when you cry at a puppy commercial,
Right.
you know that you're in the luteal phase and that estrogen is whipping progesterone's butt, and you need to do a little bit of liver love. Just work on the liver when in doubt.
Okay.
And that's where the DIM does come into play. And honestly, I don't think that DIM is one of those things that can negatively impact your natural estrogen production. It's only going to encourage that balance of the elimination. So it's just going
Mm.
to keep supporting those gates stay open.
Okay.
So
Love
I would
that.
say absolutely. And if you're not sure where you are with your cycle, if you have the symptoms, then you know that there's something a little off, right? My
Yeah.
breasts hurt. I've got a little crampy. I'm crying for dog movies or whatnot. So
Hmm.
those are the things that you can always look at to start.
Yes,
I have
Amanda.
I have a little question. So,
Go for it.
we're all pretty new here, and I know
Hi.
that you two know what DIM is, right? But I'm
Yeah.
assuming that our friends don't know what this is.
Sure. So DIM comes from the brassica family plants. So Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower. And the way I like to think about it is just it's a constituent of the plant itself. So instead of eating, 5 to 10 cups of broccoli a day,
You
which
would not want to be
honestly,
around people if that was the case,
I
probably.
mean,
No.
steam them, big time steaming.
Hmm.
But if you could eat it, I would love that. I mean, your fiber would be amazing. Your bowel movements would be awesome. That phase 3 elimination out of your system would be on point. But because not all of us are phenomenal at that, especially say come the holiday season, when there's a little bit more, maybe alcohol, a little bit more, foods that we don't commonly eat, DIM or indole 3-carbinol. So indole 3-carbinol makes DIM. And that's so we utilize DIM. It's more of a super concentrated form of the indole 3-carbinol in a more active form for liver detoxification.
And
Excuse me.
is this just like a pill that we can get, like a supplement?
It is a pill and it is a supplement. There's a couple brands that I love because somebody asked about a brand I trust. If you're going to a conventional like Sprouts, Rayleigh's, my go-to brand is Now, the bright orange label. If we just started a supplement line, my business. So it's called IH Factor. So you can go to ihfactors.com and there's a product called Estro Clear that we formulated, and it's a combination of DIM and other nutrients to support estrogen metabolism. And then of course, in bigger instances, when I'm looking at you and I'm looking at your labs, there's a much stronger form I might use by a company called Orthomolecular, and they're a physician formulation. So some people, depending on their levels and the balance of estradiol and progesterone, you might get put on that one because you need a little bit more support and enhanced liver support. So it all just depends.
And that extra strength one would be more along the lines as if you did have your hormones checked.
Exactly. I would use
Okay.
that personally. I wouldn't be that the first one you would do. That's
Right.
not how I would use that one. That would be like, oh, I'm seeing your labs. I'm seeing big imbalance. This is the one you need. It's like a step up program, for instance. So
Okay.
Wonderful.
Love that. Do you feel like this would be a way, like a more natural way to help women balance their hormones versus doing something like HRT, like hormone replacement therapy, is adding things like DIM?
So yes and no, because sometimes if it's not an estrogen issue and there's not really a metabolic dysfunction with estrogen and it's all a progesterone issue, that's that estrogen dominance that creates the increased weight gain in the belly because you're not getting the balance and lipolysis of estradiol. And
Mhm.
again, everything we're talking about when it comes to saying estrogen, we're always talking estradiol unless you're postmenopausal, right? And then it's estrone. So I want to make that distinction because we use estrogen as such an umbrella term, and that's what it is. There's 3 estrogens, and we're always talking estradiol. So we'll always look at that estradiol level. But if you need progesterone, then it obviously we have to support. How do we either, depending on your age, say you're 36, you're still in a fertile window, and you maybe want to still have kids, but you're having really poor ovulations. So you might try to make your progesterone better or support and supplement a little progesterone. And the interesting thing is you can kind of find progesterone anywhere. I don't necessarily recommend it be your go-to. Like I would always use things like Evening Primrose or Vitex first.
Mhm.
And I would always use a lot of mitochondrial support to get those ovaries like listening again to ovulation. But I would say that those would be things that you would want to consider first if your estrogen level is not an issue. And you would know that because really, instead of feeling fatigued or anxious and weepy, you would get so hungry. That's always like
Mm.
a really beautiful tell that your progesterone is doing some interesting things, is that you're just a bottomless pit of starvation.
If it's too low,
If it's too high, your
if your
progesterone. So you
progesterone's too
know how
high.
to support progesterone if it's too low because you're getting all the estrogen symptoms, right?
Mhm.
But if it's too high, that's when you don't want to supplement progesterone or you don't need to support is when you get all that hunger.
That's a really great cue to kind
Mm-hmm.
of think about, especially as we coach clients and, deal with dieting and, calories being at a sufficient level and just still
Mm-hmm.
feeling ravenous. That's a good little side note to add. But you were mentioning postmenopausal, when it, being postmenopausal, and we did get a question about postmenopausal fat loss without hormone replacement therapy. Is that possible?
I think it is possible. I think this is when you would want to support with maybe some phytoestrogens, because, of course, the biggest issue in a postmenopausal female, what that means is that they're no longer making any estradiol. And in the big picture, estradiol is the one that has the best of fat breakdown benefit. It's
Mm.
also the one that helps us choose healthier foods sometimes, and it's also the one that makes us choose poorer foods sometimes,
Oh
which
my
I
gosh,
thought was,
can you say more about that? I have to like squirrel because
yeah.
that's what we do all day is try to tell people eat this, not that.
And you
So can
probably
we
have
just
a
blame
good like
estradiol?
10 days in the month where they're like, I'm eating great, I feel really good, I've been choosing all the right foods, and then all of a sudden they're in the next week of their cycle, and all of a sudden progesterone's a little bit more present, they want a little bit more comfort, they're looking for a little bit more of the carbohydrate rich foods, they're not necessarily going towards protein.
Mm,
That's the shift in the cycle, and that's also when they're getting less lipolytic effect. So that's actually, I thought that was so cool. Like the article I read was amazing. Um, and so, it's all about the cycle. And that's when you can actually tell that there's the imbalance because they are going for those different types of foods. So,
mhm.
supporting the balance of estrogen and progesterone can definitely encourage people to choose maybe cleaner, more protein rich, more fibrous rich foods as opposed to that pizza sounds amazing. I think that's
Mhm.
a great idea.
So if I'm hearing you right,
Mm-hmm.
it is important not only to have the strategy with your fat loss being your diet in line and your exercise, but
Mm-hmm.
if your hormones aren't balanced properly,
Oh
you'll have
yeah,
a train wreck, is what
a
you're saying.
100%. And you'll have like 2 or 3 days of the cycle where you're like, I think ramen sounds like an amazing idea, but
Yeah.
instead I might try to eat lentils. But
Mm.
no, I still think this ice cream sounds amazing. And it's
Mhm.
like nothing you do can curb the appetite. And I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with clients where they're like, I just have 3 days where I'm just starving.
Yes.
And that's all an estrogen imbalance right there.
Okay. Amanda, were you going to say something?
She raised her
You're
hand and
just
everything.
relating to that. Okay. Yeah.
She's like,
That's why
this
I
is
was like,
me.
this sounds very, very familiar. Okay. I know I kind of went off topic there a little bit, but just to kind of touch back on that was without HRT, you had
Yes.
mentioned some other
With
potential
Yeah,
options.
so we talked, so phytoestrogenic nutrients have gotten, I think, a really bad rap because people like to compare phytoestrogens to xenoestrogens, and phytoestrogens are just plant estrogens. So I
Okay.
do think supporting women with things like black cohosh, dong quai,
Mm.
flaxseed oil, evening primrose oil in a postmenopausal phase could actually be really positive to support the mimicry. And this is when we think that these party crashers would be appropriate and phenomenal versus
Mhm.
the chemical party crashers, right? So utilizing nutrients like this can be beneficial to create a little bit of mimicry of that estradiol because they do sit and sit on those receptor sites. So they do create a little bit of activity. Now, whether you'll get the full fat benefit of it, that's I think that's a little bit of time, and sometimes that's the frustration
Yeah.
is I was going through some past notes, and a lot of what we were looking at for befores and after from a presentation or a seminar I'd gone to, it was 2 years. And
Wow.
I think sometimes that's the one thing is, so 6 months after starting testosterone therapy, but 2 years after starting estrogen therapy in a female, sometimes it takes some time to let your body accommodate to the new norm as well. And that's can be really difficult, I think, for people, is that it's also time.
Mhm.
We're not really good at time.
No, we're impatient. I
We're
want that
very
yesterday.
impatient
Yeah.
yesterday. So in the instance of that, I would really focus on the liver. Going back to the TUDCA is what binds bile, so it helps decrease the recycling of bile, and we keep making bile.
And that's a
Our liver,
supplement.
that is a
Yes.
supplement.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so TUDCA taken at 500 milligrams. You can start out once a day. I like it on an empty stomach because then it's just going to bind things. But you can do it after food as well. But that can really help with just balancing lipids, like your cholesterol levels. And it can actually help your liver process better. And what we've learned too is the liver, if it can't process as efficiently, especially without estrogen, we know that estrogen plays a very big role in how efficient the liver is.
Mm.
So with that loss, you now need to give a lot more support to the liver. So TUDCA, vitamin E, and then of course carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine is a phenomenal adjunct to support that metabolic loss that you've kind of
Mhm.
that has occurred. Now, some women don't like taking estrogen replacement therapy because of concerns of either personal breast cancer
That's what I was
history.
gonna ask next, is
And
what is the usual, I guess, hesitation for some women when it comes to HRT?
I think a lot of it is that in around 2000, 2002, a Women's Health Initiative study came out, and it basically said there's an increased risk of breast cancer if you take hormone replacement therapy. And really, it was like a 0.7% increase. So the percent was really nominal. And a second French cohort study came out later on. I think it's about 10 years now. And they basically did an 80,000 population study, and they noted that if you were on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy,
Mm.
not just hormone replacement therapy, because those two things are different, that the risk of breast cancer is nominal,
Mm.
meaning there's no negative as to whether you're either if you're off it or on it. If you're gonna get breast cancer, unfortunately, it's a negative statement, but if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen regardless of whether you're on it or not. So the positive is that people that do tend to be on a replacement therapy, if they're under a proper practitioner, their liver is being monitored, their metabolism is being monitored. If they have I have a patient that has a really high risk breast cancer, and she came with me, and her breast fibroids shrunk after we got her on a metabolism formula. We did a urine metabolism testing. So this is when you want to maybe work with a person. You're
Yeah.
interested in it, but you're scared about it. Your sister, your aunt, your mom maybe have a
Mhm.
history of it, but you feel like crap, we'll say.
Yeah.
This is when you want to work with somebody that knows how to do the proper testing and helps make sure that all of that elimination is taking place so that you can actually get the full benefit of it. And, estrogen innately is not bad. It's just the way our body gets bombarded that makes it bad,
Yeah. Yeah. Amanda, were you gonna add something or did somebody have a question?
I wanted to kind of like revert back because I know we're talking about TEDCA and we're talking about it being a supplement. It's in pill form typically, right? I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure that the spelling was correct. TUDCA, correct?
You are correct. And it is
Okay.
actually an acronym. And please don't try to make me say the really long, it's a really crazy word.
Please try. Please
No,
try.
I refuse. I'm gonna have to Google it. I admit that there are some words in the world of medicine that I give me a second to pronounce it 3 times in my head and then I'll attempt it out loud.
No, you're good.
But
You're
yes,
good.
you are correct. It's usually all capitalized because it is an acronym for an actual much longer word, like DHEA is a shortened
And
form.
dim.
And DIM, exactly, right. And
Yeah.
all three, I3C, same thing.
Okay.
So yes, you are correct.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit about testosterone, if you don't mind, because
Yes, let's
yeah,
talk. I think
because
it's super underused.
we obviously we have a lot of clients who we refer out for naturopathic or integrative medicine.
Mhm.
And I have a question for you later about the stigmas behind that, and we'll dive into that a little bit more because I know there are a lot of traditional, people who are really just enamored by traditional medicine and primary care and the general way that we're used to doing medicine. And
Correct.
anything outside of that is very like scary, or is this woo woo, and things like that. So I really want to go into that in a little bit, but testosterone, how it relates to women's hormones, because I think we're still doing the work of sharing with women, like, you have testosterone.
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah, women
100%.
have testosterone. So can you just dive a little bit about the relation to, fat loss and muscle preservation, muscle gain, and how testosterone plays
100%.
a role in that?
Absolutely. So, well, we can backtrack a touch. So, high levels of stress can actually inhibit testosterone. So, let's
Mm.
just start with that. So, if you say work a 40-hour work week and you've been running on cortisol for say 17 years because that's how long you've been at this job, or you just don't sleep well, the more your cortisol is being produced, the more your natural testosterone production most likely will become inhibited. And there was a
Mm.
great study that was done with marathon runners. Now, not everybody's a marathon runner, but we understand the extent of what running 26 miles is, right? And they found
It's
that
awful.
I will never do it. So perfect. It's just one of those things that are not on my bucket list.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what they found was that the individual's testosterone tanked, completely bottomed out, and it didn't normalize for 20 days. So if one event of high stress will tank testosterone for 20 days, obviously what is it doing over a lifespan?
Mhm.
And the really interesting thing about testosterone in women is that is your strength, that is your range of motion, that is your physical muscle metabolism. And as women age and as cortisol levels kind of burn out the system a little bit, it's actually a really common hormone to decline. I'm right there with you, Erica.
Mhm.
Never. Uh, but if they're constantly going down, then you want to be able to supplement basically. And that's one that you're not really going to get from an herb, unfortunately. That is one that requires a cream or an injectable or a pellet, depending on the person. But testosterone, again, it's, if you want to think about one word that defines testosterone in the female system, it's strength. And as we lose that, we go into
I'm like,
what's
that's what
called,
we are telling you, ladies.
yeah, it's what we go into what's called catabolism or tissue breakdown.
Mhm.
We run what's called an IGF-1 or insulin-like growth factor 1, and it actually can give us a really good information about the release of growth hormone and how well testosterone is functioning on muscle integrity and how well you're eating protein, just by looking at IGF-1 levels. And if IGF-1 levels and testosterone levels are both declined, you need to do something to support that, because you might be spending weeks in the gym and trying to do everything and nothing you're doing is getting you into the next step, right?
Mm,
And
mhm.
that's all testosterone right there. Waking up feeling achy is a really interesting one. And having really poor recovery is also a really interesting symptom that a lot of women feel with the
Mhm.
lack of testosterone.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful hormone for women. And I, like you, tell women, well, it's not our primary sex hormone because that is estradiol, but it is a very important one and we still need it in our systems. Like that's huge.
Right. And I know something we haven't really touched on either, but is something that is important to me in terms of like educating women as well, because it's a huge part of our lives is low libido also is a side effect of low testosterone. So what are your thoughts on that as far as that symptom related to testosterone?
I find that testosterone is a finicky one with libido because it does bring blood and blood flow to the system. That's what it's really good at. One of the coolest things I think testosterone does is that it increases oxygen uptake into the cell. That's why it makes your muscles work better. That's why it makes your libido enhanced, but it's also very dose and stress dependent, I find. You know, every woman is a little bit different. I can do so much with one woman at 1 milligram, say, and we're talking cream application here, and I can do and another woman that is completely different, just, you know, everybody is different. They might need 5 milligrams to create a benefit of not only increasing the levels to optimal ranges, which for me is the upper third of the female range, unless they are in a completely different output environment. And that's how I call you lovely ladies that are in the gym, is it's a different output, right? Like I sit in a desk doing this all day. This is literally my job. I'm on Zoom all day. And so my output in comparison to somebody that is in the gym 5 days a week for 2+ hours, or at least an hour, is completely different. And maybe somebody that's training for a show, it's going to be night and day. So the requirement of what the system needs is also really important. So we always read it based on who's sitting in front of me. But I mean, gosh, if you could do anything, raise your testosterone levels for sure.
Most definitely. And I think you did already mention that that also does decline as you age too,
It
right?
does, especially as stress levels increase over time. Like I said, that's why I wanted to preface with high cortisol commonly means a lower level of testosterone, even if you're in range. Like, you know, I think one thing that I always say is that just because you're in range doesn't mean you're in the optimal level of the range. You're not necessarily where we want to see you. And a female range is 2 to 45. And
Yeah.
if I want you at 40 and you're at 10, you're in range. So any other conventional practitioner is going to be like, oh, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Your
Yeah,
testosterone's not low. You know what
exactly.
I mean? And, but you're like, but I feel really achy and my muscles are drooping and I don't feel strong and I can't open a jar of pickles or, you know, your peanut butter or whatever, because your husband closed it, or, you know, whoever lives in the house with you. So it's like, that's that loss of muscle integrity. And that's you going into catabolism.
I
Amanda, did
feel
you?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I really want to kind of like reiterate that just a little bit, because we have women all the time that are like, oh, my primary care took my hormones, everything is fine.
Oh, I
But
hate that saying.
they still feel like garbage,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yes.
totally.
So I just want to like reiterate that
Mhm.
your primary care doctor is going to say, yeah, you're in range, but you're not optimal. So
I wish
that's
I
why
wish
you
I
still feel
had
bad.
a graph in front of me of this. And this is one of those things that I think is really important. So when a woman has their labs collected, it's all about where in the cycle they're collecting the labs. And if you have a normal cycle, it's really important to also know, well, I don't have a normal cycle. So when I'm collecting my labs, I'm not really sure where things are. So you also need to have a practitioner that's willing to kind of decipher with you, right? So if, for instance, estradiol can have a range of 30 to 400, depending on where you are in the cycle, right? So if I'm reading you on day 3 or 4, I want you to be about 40. But if I'm reading you on day 12 or 13, right before ovulation, maybe I want you at 250. But then if you're in the luteal phase where I'm wanting that estradiol progesterone peak, maybe I want you at 150 or 175. Those are all night and day difference in numbers, right?
Yeah. I think another thing too, just to go for you guys, as in like what you guys do, is you do tell your clients, like, I don't want you to take your labs until you're in this part
Correct.
of
Very
your
important.
cycle.
100% important, because if we don't know how to read your labs, or we're not getting you when the symptoms are at their worst, and we also might need you to go in 2 different times. Like I have a woman that has ovulation discomfort and pain as well. So I send people for labs during that time as well, so we can see if they're having an excess peak of estrogen, because that might be when the issue is also starting. So yeah, I mean, it's really important to know when to go. Now, obviously in the postmenopausal world, there's no cycle. And the cool thing about that is when I meet with you, I can send you whenever you'd like. 2 weeks from now, make sure you get that, 8 a.m. appointment. But when we're cycling, we have to go in the right times, because if not, then what's the point? I don't have the right range. I don't have the balance we're looking for. I don't know what's happening. And so when people get sent to the lab, one of the big questions I always ask is, well, when did you go? Oh, I don't know. He just did them that day, or she did them that day when I saw them. Well, were you fasting? Oh, no. And then, of course, then you come to find out they only ran an FSH and everything is fine because you're not perimenopausal in the FSH read yet. So they don't even check half the time what's happening with those lovely hormones. So I found that when we say we've run our hormones, it's always a question of, well, where were you and what did they actually run? And did they really do a complete panel? Did they really check all of the proper markers? And then, of course, you come to find out they were on day like 7. And
I mean,
you have no progesterone on day 7 anyway. So,
in my experience, okay, so because I do work with you guys, I had told my actual OB GYN that I was doing it with you guys because my doctor and my insurance that I have now was not doing what I wanted them to. Well, he was not very happy about that. And he also told me, well, we have people that can pull your labs as well. And I said, okay, great. He goes, would you like to do that? I said, yeah. Well, guess what? They pulled my labs, never called me back about it.
Oh, hopeful. Yay.
Yeah.
So have somebody that cares and that is going to reach back out. Okay.
Well,
it's important.
And there's a method to the madness. Sometimes I think people do get frustrated because we're a cash-based business. Most naturopathic practitioners are, integrative practitioners are. And the biggest thing is when we run a panel, I don't just want to call you and say, hey, you're good, because it's never the way it works. There's always tuning that you can do. There's always, you need better electrolytes. There's always, we need to work on your liver a little bit. There's always your thyroid conversion is a little off, So even though everything is in range, there's always a conversation that needs to be had. So we might do the lab review after the initial appointment, but it's an actual appointment so that we can sit and talk and you can really learn about what's going on within your system, because it's also, technically the word doctor comes from the term teacher. You're supposed to educate people and help them learn about themselves. And obviously the joys of the internet today and podcasts is that, people can start doing that without their practitioners because their practitioners are not running the labs. Or if you don't get a call, that means everything is fine.
Right. Yeah. Now, back on the topic of drawing labs at different times due to, your cycle, is this something that testosterone also varies throughout your cycle, or does that stay pretty steady?
That one stays pretty steady. Obviously, situationally, it can fluctuate. Like, say, for instance, you just ran that marathon. We probably don't want to check your testosterone a week after. So maybe we will ask you to wait a month to recheck your labs and then maybe get you the next cycle, or you're about to do a show, or there's all these other metabolic things that maybe need to be considered. But usually the joys of testosterone is it can be checked through the entirety of the cycle. Same with thyroid, same with cortisol, DHEA. The DHEA, cortisol fluctuate depending on your environment and what's happening in your life. And are you about to go to your family Christmas party and you forgot to do this, or you dropped that, or you put salt instead of sugar in your cake? I've done that before. That was super fun. I don't even know how I did it. I made the cake at 2 a.m. That's what it comes down to. Yeah, reach for the wrong bag. But it's all about what environment are you in? So those will always fluctuate through the month. So when I see something really high, you always have to talk about that. Like, so tell me, what's been going on? Your cortisol is really high, or I know what's going on because you're a lawyer, or, you own your own business, or you own your own business and then you decided to start a second business. Like, I have people that are doing that. And so, right. So, so it's like, well, we know why your cortisol is high. What now we have to do is negate the support, negate the side effects of the elevated cortisol, or, thyroid or testosterone or whatnot.
Along the lines of testosterone, somebody has a question. Does PCOS change testosterone supplementation?
So that's an interesting one, because I have had PCOS patients in front of me that have had no issues with testosterone, but they have all the side effects of the androgens. And so a lot of it's a metabolic dysfunction. Again, it's like kind of maybe blocking the pathway towards DHT, or maybe it's even an elevated DHEA and not an elevated testosterone. But I do find in PCOS, we tend to give more things along the lines, if you're fitting the picture of a androgen PCOS, and that would be like unusual hair growth, acne, and obviously the test itself is high. But interestingly enough, I've only ran into like a handful of really high testosterone levels in PCOS. I find that it's actually more of an insulin resistance issue, which some people believe can create an imbalance in the way estrogen and testosterone function, right? Because it's creating an inhibitory effect. So there are things that we can and cannot do with PCOS. And honestly, it all just depends on how you respond. I find that some PCOS patients do respond negatively to testosterone, like they might actually increase their acne or hair growth. And in turn, it might not be worth it, even if their testosterone levels aren't in a great range or normal. So I think it all just depends on the person. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And what it stands for, it's a combination of symptoms. So you might have anovulatory cycles, you might have insulin resistance, you might have issues with weight loss, or have a propensity of being slightly overweight or even obese, and you might have obviously high testosterone.
How is this typically diagnosed?
Honestly, I think it's actually the most poorly diagnosed disease out there for women, because really it's a disease of metabolic dysfunction. So a lot of what we give when we're dealing with PCOS is like a lot of mitochondria support, help the system work better, maybe low dose naltrexone to negate some of the side effects of PCOS. But I actually find that testosterone, it's not always a testosterone issue, it's how testosterone is moving into the next metabolite that becomes the issue. And that's where sometimes you have to focus. So saw palmetto that blocks DHT, for instance, might be more beneficial than, with testosterone, if you want to try that. But also there are some herbs that can be helpful as well for testosterone that don't necessarily have to give testosterone, or even creatine. Like creatine and BCAAs are like phenomenal for the body and the female system when they're trying to help with muscle integrity and recovery, but they're not necessarily able to take testosterone.
I love that. Okay. Let's shift gears just a little bit when it comes to diet and nutrition. Obviously, that's something we talk heavily about. How do you think extreme dieting and or yo-yo dieting, where you're extreme in really cutting your calories or extreme in like overeating, contributes to hormone disruption?
That's a good one. I think that's a really good one. I think honestly, I think it's less the diet itself and more the impact on your emotional well-being that creates the biggest issue. I don't know because you can go through like a week, just like in your cycle, and we talked about that, you can do a week of like pristine, filled, great, I eat all this protein and I'm eating my salads and vegetables. And that's just because you're pre-ovulatory and your body feels awesome. And then you go on the next 10 days and you're like, I feel like crap and all I want is ice cream. I don't think it's necessarily that the change in diet. Obviously, more poor food is going to negatively impact your glucose balance and your liver health. Obviously, those will play a role, but really, I think it's just the mental component of it that I think plays a bigger hormonal impact than actually the yo-yo dieting. Granted, of course, if you are eating more processed foods, then of course you're going to impact your hormones more greatly than if you are eating at least clean or bad foods.
Most
Which I don't
definitely.
know
Yeah.
if it exists.
Yeah. No, I think what I was sort of pointing to is we have a demographic of women that come in and they have been extreme dieting for years, right? Where they're like
Years.
1,000 calories, that's their go-to, excessive cardio, and
Oh
they
yeah.
think that's the way to live, right? I'm just got to keep cutting calories more because
Yep.
I haven't reached a destination. And
And
I,
what we find is
yeah,
you're feeding cortisol the whole way.
yes. So I think that was what I was getting at. Is there something
Absolutely.
that is harming them hormonally? And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
does
because
thyroid get affected as well?
so yeah, anytime cortisol is infected, there's some information that indicates that higher levels of cortisol over time can impact the conversion of T4 into T3, and over time obviously raise the TSH. So TSH is one of those interesting hormones that we want it lower, not higher, right? So it's the opposite. And I always say it's the mom hormone. TSH, FSH, LH, those are mom hormones. Those are coming from the brain, going down to the specific gland or organ and signaling a to do. So thyroid stimulating hormone is not an actual thyroid hormone that creates metabolic effect. Thyroid stimulating hormone tells the thyroid, make thyroid hormone, make T4. And in turn, then T4 goes to the liver and kidneys primarily, and that's where it goes and converts from T4 into T3. But say you have a liver dysfunction, maybe you don't have the best conversion, or say you have high cortisol, your body's going to naturally want to decrease your metabolic output if you think about it, right? Your body is so beyond intelligent. And I don't think we give it any real benefit, in all honesty. That it's trying to settle our system down, and it's telling you maybe you do need to stop all the cardio. And in instances like that, I tell people just go on a walk, like stop all exercise altogether, because really you're just frying your own system and you're actually making your weight loss a bigger issue. So this is where I've had people come to me and they've said, I'm very stressed out. I know you're going to tell me I can't exercise, but I'm going to still exercise. And I go, okay, well, let's just do your blood work and then we'll see what we decide. And then, you know, over time, I win people over, or over time, we find balance. Like, I think a lot of it is
I hear it
balance?
often. Yeah.
But sometimes it's exactly that. Like, maybe do 5 minutes of a warm up, but then just focus on weightlifting. You know, like focus on doing body exercises, go to a yoga class. Like, that's the biggest exercise of the little tiny muscles that I never knew existed that exist. And I leave yoga classes sometimes so sore. And I'm just like, what just happened in my life?
Most definitely.
So yes, cortisol and yo-yo dieting are definitely going to play hand in hand, because it's an overthinking process, I would say.
Yeah, most definitely. Amanda, were there any questions that we missed in the chat box?
So far, there's definitely been some questions, not quite on this one, but since we're talking about cortisol, you already kind of said a few things of simple ways to manage your cortisol. Obviously, not trying to work out to the intensity that they are, you know,
but also take a break day, walk, like
have a rest day,
have a couple rest days. Sometimes I tell people no exercise, you know, day after the other, or maybe start exercising, you know, Monday, Thursday, Sunday. Like, give yourself a couple days to actually relax, and then really bring in those BCAAs. There's some really cool research about leucine in weight loss, and just utilizing a certain dose. And I don't have that because it wasn't a part of what I was looking at, but like just the BCAAs and recovery and repair and feeding your system. Like, don't forget to feed your system the amino acids that it requires, right? So I think you might actually get more benefit of working out twice a week, but high dose BCAAs every day, and then really let those amino acids do their job for your system.
I love that.
So there was a few questions. Do we want to kind of get off topic, or we want to wait for those until the end?
Yeah, I think, you know, I had a bulk of my questions that we covered. So if you want to just dive into whatever's left there, we can do that, and then we can wrap up.
Perfect. Okay. So this question is, how can fatty liver disease affect your hormones?
Well, just like we were talking about when it comes to taking out the trash, that's basically what fatty liver disease affects. So fatty liver disease can impact the way you bring nutrients into the system, but also the way you eliminate your cellular waste, as well as your hormones. So it can impact phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism, which means that you might have just exogenous estrogens floating around and creating a little bit of that excess estrogen chaos that is, you know, presenting in your system. And you can't quite figure out, well, I'm eating clean or I'm doing these things, but I still have a liver dysfunction. And that's where we talked about like TUDCA and carnitine and vitamin E to help support fatty liver. And also just a loss of estrogen can enhance natural fatty liver, what's called metabolic associated fatty liver disease or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The loss of estrogen can really impact the way we process our fat or our lipids. So just working on things that can help balance that out are obviously really important.
Okay, so another question came through. Please tell me if I've asked this already. I don't think I did, though. Thyroid balance. I have normal numbers, but I'm still symptomatic.
But the question I would ask is, when you say you have normal numbers, what labs have actually been collected? So an initial thyroid panel should consist of TSH. And a lot of people don't like TSH, but I actually think it's really important because it tells me how well I'm doing. And it tells me if there's weird fluctuations in the communication of your pituitary to your thyroid. So it's a really important hormone to test. A lot of people, I've had practitioners that don't test it at all, and I have people that only test that. And it's definitely not the game changer, right? So the goal would be, 0.5 to 2 for a TSH. Free T4, that's what you're freely available making from the thyroid, sending out to the system. Definitely you could do a total T4, but I don't always run it just because a lot of the times we're playing the cash game, and what we're looking at is T4 to T3 conversion. And so the big question is total T3, free T3, and then of course reverse T3. So I mean, the question ultimately I would say to that is, have they actually checked your free T3? And if it was great, well, did you have enough total T3 floating around in your system that actually allows you to feel like you have good thyroid function? And then reverse T3 is considered a non-active T3, which means it's only metabolized. You make it and it's eliminated. There's no activity available for it. So if you're higher or elevated in the range, you're actually making trash T3. So I would say every time I've heard that, it's usually a conversion disorder, and you have to have those T3 levels checked, because it's T3 that creates all of the metabolic effect, the sense of wellness, the metabolism that we think of when we think of thyroid. It's all T3. So you've got to look at those values.
Yeah. I'm so glad you dove into that, because that was probably one of the biggest game changers for me when I
Mhm.
started working with, naturopathic integrative medicine. Was I wasn't feeling well. I would take my son to school at, 8 a.m. and I'd come home and I would get back in bed and I'd sleep
Mhm.
till 11 or 11:30,
Totally.
and I'd be ready for bed again at like 8, and I could not figure
Mhm.
out what's wrong. Regular primary care just ran basic stuff. Your numbers are
TSH,
fine.
TSH looks great. Yep,
Yeah.
it's in range. Even if
And
it's at 3, it's not great,
yeah. And then I started working with an integrative doctor who did exactly the panel that you're saying. And
Mhm.
it was like lit up like a Christmas tree, and
Yeah.
just game changer for how I felt, my energy, honestly, maintaining healthy levels of body fat as well.
Yeah. Even
Yeah.
because, again, when we talk about the gas pedal of the body, it's not TSH that is our gas pedal. It's not T4. It's all T3. So a lot of the people that I find that have T3 dysfunction, it's like their T4 is fine, their TSH is fine, but their T3, their total T3 is on like the low end of the range.
Mhm.
And it's so frustrating because we either have to help the adrenal game or give some T3. And sometimes we do both, because you got to do both. You got to fix the problem, but you also need to support the plan at hand. Like, life is not changing. That's the one thing I always tell people. Unfortunately, I can't send you to an island for 6 months. We
Yeah.
need to pay into some system where we can just go lay on an island and our families are well taken care of and we don't have to worry about anything. We just get to go sit and rest and sleep for 6 months. That would be like the best cure all for our whole system.
Mhm.
Come back totally refreshed. Probably never come back, maybe, but we don't get that opportunity. We still have to wake up every day. We still go to work. We still make sure our families are taken care of. We still do X, Y, and Z. And so we have to support the plan at hand. And you might call it, like, it might be a little bit of a band-aid, but it's also helping you be able to get your son to school, but also be a present parent, or,
Mhm.
be functional in work and make sure your brain doesn't keep, zoning out or blanking on you. So I think
Yeah.
T3 is super, super underutilized, but also really important.
Okay.
I just want to pop in and backpedal just a little bit for some of the people that are unsure, or maybe they missed it in the conversation right now. The
Mhm.
T3, T4 is the thyroid.
Yes, we're all on thyroid.
Yeah.
We're all on
And
thyroid. Okay.
so the thyroid primarily makes T4 or thyroxine, a little bit of T3 or triiodothyronine, and then the T4 floats around the system. And as the body needs it, the body will then convert T4 into T3. Right. And then that's where the primary metabolism of the system takes place, is with T3. That's our, our fuel,
Mhm.
our gas pedal, our sense of wellness and energy. Thyroid is huge, and thyroid is impacted by too much estrogen, too much cortisol. Thyroid can be impacted by quite a bit of things.
Okay, let's
Okay.
take one more question from the question box, which was just a quick brief one, just so we can be respectful of everyone's time today, because I do have one final wrap-up question. So what is the best way to supplement with BCAAs?
So unfortunately, I think all amino acids are not necessarily the best tasting, but I do think powder form is your best bet because of the dose you're looking for. I am not a fan of taking like, 8 to 10 capsules of just one thing a day unless I'm sick and then I'm going to take a bunch of that one immune product. Great, but it's for a purpose and it's really short term. BCAAs, you want to get that full scoop. I really like when it's like a 2-1-1 ratio.
Yes, that's
Leucine
usually
is
what we
two
use.
parts. Yeah, leucine
Mhm.
is 2 parts. Valine and isoleucine are 1 part. And really, it's because you want the leucine to be like 2,000 or 3,000 milligrams is what you're looking for. And I encourage a lot of women to not just take it the day of exercise. I encourage them to take it every day because of that musculoskeletal benefit. That and EAAs, like EAAs are disgusting, but man, just throw some
Very.
protein powder in them and the benefit will be, like you just feel good when you get those base nutrients in your system. So
Mhm.
I do like and encourage powders. I encourage people to try to find something that doesn't have a bunch of gunk in it. Um, but I can always let Diane know the company that I always recommend, but she probably also has a company that she recommends for that
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, we
So
usually carry some in the studio, and
perfect.
I've been living on
Yeah.
BCAAs for, I feel like, 20 years.
I
Well, and
have
honestly, it probably helps with just your weight balance as well, because the
Yeah,
research is out there is phenomenal for what leucine can do for weight
that's
balance. So
definitely.
one more thing, because you're talking about BCAAs and taking them every day, whether you're training or not. Would you also recommend that for creatine as well?
yeah, so the research behind creatine in some women, and just obviously the metabolic effect of what creatine offers, again, it's another amino acid that our body just requires that I don't think women get in enough amino acids. We're really bad about our protein intake. And I think in an ideal world, um, we should be getting, well, research indicates just for osteoporosis, we should be getting a minimum of 80 grams of protein per day. The average woman,
Yeah,
just for osteoporosis prevention. But nobody's getting that. I can
yeah,
probably get
yeah.
most of my patients to get 40 or 50 grams of protein in a day when we set guidelines and goals.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say that this is where we want to supplement those essential amino acids or EAAs. And then of course the branched chain amino acid or BCAA. And they all have different functions in our system, but we're just not getting enough of those nutrients in, and we're not getting enough of those essential nutrients in to help support the metabolic function, the chemical process of all the peptides in our system, because we're not getting in enough amino acids. I actually think people could feel better just by doing a lot of that, to be honest. And that actually is one of my big things with postmenopausal women that don't also want to do hormones is a lot of amino acid therapy.
Yeah, I love that. We'll link up everything in the show notes too and descriptions so people can have access to stuff. But
Perfect.
one final question I have is, what is your, I guess, go-to when you hear people that are skeptical of, one, naturopathic or integrative doctors, and two, also doing that via telemedicine, because we're so conditioned to, I
Yeah.
have to go see a doctor for him to like take my temperature and put me on the scale and do all
Mm-hmm.
the biometrics. So what is your like elevator pitch for what you do, right? Because it's important, and
It is
Amanda
important.
and I and all the coaches on our team are doing the good work as far as being advocates for what you guys do, but I think it's
Yeah.
great to also hear it in your perspective from a professional opinion.
Well, I think the really cool thing about what we do is that, we're not primary care practitioners. There are some people that do ask me to support what their primaries do as far as glucose balance or blood pressure stuff, but we're not primary care providers. So I'm not necessarily always monitoring your blood pressure. There might be people I send to check for things like that as we do certain programs, but that's not always my first go-to. So when we're doing hormone replacement therapy, a lot of it is a combination of symptomology, which I can learn from you in a conversation in a coffee shop, or I can learn from you in a Zoom meeting. So I think that's the one thing. It's a lot of conversation about your history, what's been going on with your life, your lifestyle leading up to where we are today, fertility issues, number of kids, digestive health, all of these things, it's a conversation. So I think one of the big confusions is I'm not sitting there with you for 3 minutes just saying, okay, what's your complaint? Okay, cool, we'll send you for labs.
And throw a
I'm
pill at you.
sitting and maybe even throw a pill at you, but maybe your labs are fine. So like, you're fine. So like, I don't need to do anything. Right. So in turn, what we're going to do is we're going to get a proper thorough history, which again is the conversation. We've just had a conversation here today about quite a bit of stuff, and we got some really great information. It's no different than when we're meeting one-on-one in a Zoom room, where you're sitting at home with your either hazy background or your kid in the background, or maybe you're on your cell phone in your car, because I've done that one too. It's still me learning about you, because what I'm not necessarily doing is tracking those biometrics all the time. Now, there probably are some people that I will have to do that with, and then in turn I require certain things. But in this instance, it's blood work. It might be a salivary panel. It might be a urine metabolism panel. But the cool thing about the world today is the UPS world is awesome, except for around the holidays, as you probably all know. But like, I can send you anything anywhere in the US, which is what I love about this. We have a nationwide Quest account, which means I can send you to any Quest in the whole US to get your blood work done. And all I have to tell you is how and when to do things. So, if I can guide you this way, it's no different than being guided by a podcast that you're listening to get more information about how to help your system.
Yeah.
Right. It's just more specific.
Yes. And I think that we believe so solidly in the work that, doctors like yourself do, that I cannot tell you how many times in the course of my coaching athletes and lifestyle clients where they've been checking in every week. I can have someone across the US. They've checked in every week, same symptomology, the same issues, or I know when they're on their period because their check-in looks like verbal diarrhea of everything they hate in their life. And I will tell them, you need to get your hormones checked. They'll go to their primary care. This is what happens classically every time. They go to their primary care. My doctor says I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. I said, show me your labs. They show me. I already know there's not going to be the level of, intricacy that there is when you guys are, send for labs. And so what I do is I will get very coachy on them. And I will say, I'm going to pause your coaching with me so you can go pay to have that done. Because sometimes budget is an objection, right? And I understand that because it's not covered by their insurance and they don't know the value in it because they haven't experienced it. So I will literally take one for the team and I will say, I'm going to pause your coaching with me because that monthly payment you pay me, go pay them because we are going to be here for another 6 months with the same problem. I can guarantee that. And I've had so many people that have taken advantage of that, or they pause and they come back and they're like, okay, Dr. Sundermeyer's got me on a plan. Things are looking good. Let's get back on track. So it's super valuable. And I think it's something that, a lot of people don't understand how valuable it is when this is the only place you have to live, your body.
Yeah.
You need
This
to
is
figure
your
out,
home. You don't want to feel like crud forever.
No. Amanda.
Awesome.
I have one more quick question because I know everybody's like, how does it work? Right. So I've done it. I already know. But
we both do.
Yeah, we already know. But I think it's really good to say, because you're already kind of explaining it in the last little talk real quick was, we get on a phone call, on a Zoom, you get to see your doctor face to face. You kind of talk about your life. What's going on with your life? How are you feeling? What's going on? And then, so after that first initial meeting with you, what do you do for them? Where did they go? How does it work for them?
Perfect. So let's say I have a 46-year-old female. She's cycling, but it's every 6 weeks. We talk about her symptoms during the meeting. Maybe we talk about a bunch of other stuff. We start a minor plan. Like, I always want to give a little bit of just kind of support based on just what I'm hearing, because I can do a lot just from what I'm hearing and about the balance. Maybe you're not sleeping and I want to try to get you to sleep better, because if I can't get you to sleep, I can't fix your insulin. If we can't fix your insulin, we're not going to create balance in your weight, right? So I try to get people to sleep. I might give them magnesium. I might give them other nutrients, depending on if it's a stress-oriented, musculoskeletal-oriented, etc. So they leave with a small protocol in their visit summary. And then depending on what we've discussed, we'll determine what types of labs. Commonly it's a full panel. Like I run the works, right? I'm like, make sure you do plenty of protein the night before, or make sure you're drinking plenty of water. They're going to draw all of your blood, and make sure you have a protein shake sometimes after, because you're going to want to have some food right after, because some people don't tolerate blood draws well. Mm. And then we schedule usually a 3 to 4 week lab review after the fact. And we've, within that time, we've planned it out depending on if their cycle is a little longer, maybe it's going to be 5 or 6 weeks, because maybe they've just started, or just had their day 21. That was always the worst. Like 3 days ago, oh, you just had your day 21. We have to wait a whole month to get your labs again. But we'll get their labs when it's appropriate. We might run a salivary cortisol panel to look at their adrenal glands, depending on the environment. So we get all of that sent out to the person, regardless of where they are. As long as you have a mailbox, we can send you packages, we can send you test kits, we can do it. We do everything electronically through the electronic system that we utilize for our charts that has a patient portal side. So you receive a lab slip that you print out. And if it's a cash pay, we send it directly to Quest, although we always encourage people to print things out because you just never know. And you go do the things that we've set out. And then obviously you get your supplements in, you start the regimen that we set forward for you. And then when we meet, we go, okay, that product was awesome. We're going to keep that. Maybe we'll modify it, the dosing up a little higher. This one was great for you, but based on this, maybe we need to finish this one up and actually start this one because you need a little bit more. And it all just depends. So we do the initial, about a month later, we'll do a lab review. And then usually we see each other in about 6 to 8 weeks thereafter, depending on the individual, because usually it takes a good 6 to 8 weeks to really let the body settle into the new regimen. And like I said previously, it's unfortunately the frustrating thing is it's like, if I could find that one pill for every female, I would be rich, a bazillionaire for sure. Like, just come to me. Only I know the formula. Mm-hmm. And in 2 days, you're going to feel amazing, but it does take a little bit of time. Right. Yeah. So just reminding people that it's going to take at least 2 cycles to really set yourself back in. 3 and 4 cycles, even better. Like your body will just keep feeling better. So if you allow your body to have that time, be kind to yourself and give yourself a little bit of time. You spent the last 20, 30 years building up to this point. I'm only asking for, 6 months of time to really create the balance we're looking for. And I'm sure you guys do too.
Which is reasonable. Yeah. Which is reasonable.
But it would be reasonable. I agree.
Yes. But I think this is so important and really ties into what we do as far as diet coaching. And it really, we say we say diet coaching, but really it's a lot of like lifestyle managing and helping our clients uncover what it is that they're doing that got them to this point, right? Not just like, here's some macros, here's a meal plan, go do these exercises. It's more of like, but why did you get here? Let's start to peel the onion. And working with clinics such as yourself. And I know your husband is also a physician, and that's something we didn't even touch on too, that you guys work together. But it is the next level. And also it's incredibly empowering. It's empowering to yourself as a human, as a woman, to understand I'm not broken. These things are happening and you think it's just you. And you really get to understand when you work with somebody who can explain it to you and has the patience and help you, again, peel the layers of the onion. It's a priceless experience, really.
And I think just learning, just like having someone take the time with you, because sometimes, and I have a couple people that we meet and they're doing great, but they have to, there's a venting component that comes along with a safe space. Like, I know that I'm here in my office and you're there in, your bedroom, your car, wherever, but the space that we create in our digital world, we try to, this is a safe place. Women cry about their frustrations. Oh my God, there is something happening with me. You know what I mean? Like I'm not crazy. My husband's going to be so happy, or, my partner's going to be so happy because they just don't know what to do with me anymore, and so it is I think there's a sense of relief with appointments like this because, people, you've been heard finally, instead of the MA coming in and saying, what's wrong with you? And the doctor coming in and say, cool, like, all right, well, we'll go run your blood work. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, like we don't want 5 minutes of time. We want people to also feel like we're being heard. And there's also, I think, a sense of relief when people just hear you finally as well, which I'm sure you you guys notice as trainers, just because we also act as just listening poles, or
Yes, I say
so
we're not just trainers. We don't just you don't just pay us to watch you exercise. We also
nope.
listen to you. We know about your
Yep.
families. We know about
Yep.
all the things.
100%.
And sometimes we therapize without, therapizing, and that's okay. That's what we're here
We're
for.
here for this. We're here to
Yeah.
listen. I'm
Yeah.
very good at listening.
I
Amanda?
think I think there's a big giant question in the room right now is, are you guys taking new clients?
Oh,
Yes, I did see that. When we are taking new clients, you just have to give a call to the office, or you can shoot an email to info@infusionhealth.org and just request a new patient appointment. I will say, unfortunately, that we are totally booked out for the rest of the year. So I think we're into January, February at this point for new patients. But what my front desk will always tell you is, if you are on point with finishing all of your paperwork, and
moves you up.
you will always get moved up. If your paperwork is not done, she'll go on to the next person. So don't hesitate to make sure that everything is set and ready to go.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to, even though they hear that you have a wait list, and this is what I tell my clients, online clients, is just get on the wait list, like start the process, because
Yeah,
they're like, oh my
100%.
God,
There are
it's not for 2
cancellations
months.
all the time.
Yeah. And, it's like, oh my gosh, it's not for 2 months. And I'm like, you've waited like 25 years. Like, you'll be fine. Like, just at least get in the pipeline. Okay.
Yeah. But
But
again, you never know if you can get pulled in. So I would just
exactly.
always say, like,
Which
you never know.
happens. Yeah. Often.
A lot. Yeah, it
Mhm.
does happen a lot. They're mean. They'll always try and fill my schedule. I'm like, oh, I was so excited. I had like 30 minutes to finish my charting. Nope. Patient.
Nope.
Bam.
Next person,
Yeah.
assembly line.
And you can always ask to be put on the cancellation list as well. And if
Yes.
you feel like this is like, there are some bigger cases out there, like really dysregulation of menstrual cycle, like, and if it's a more of an urgent matter, we always do try to prioritize some of those bigger things. So if there is some kind of like, I just bleed all month long, like, we're not going to want you to go and to become anemic and wait, 3 to 6 months for that.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, this was really great. I know you just left your email address, but can you tell everyone where else they can find you on social, your website?
Yes. So we have our social media. I suck at this. So our TikTok, we just got one of those.
You
It's
are a
really
TikToker, Dr. Z.
not by choice. I've been told it's really positive for a younger population. I'm like, cool. It's regenerative.medicine, at regenerative.medicine. And then our Instagram is infusion_health. And then mine is
Website.
zahara.sophia. That's just me.
Uh-huh.
And then our website is infusionhealth.org, not .com.
Okay.
Remind people that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Amanda, that's correct. Infusion_health.
And I
All right.
also added in the website as well.
In the
Thank
chat
you.
box.
Yes.
In the chat box.
Yeah. So if you ladies are here on Zoom live right now, there is a link in the chat box should you be interested. If not, everything will also be linked up in the show notes as well. So everyone will have access to that. But any parting words?
Me?
Yeah.
Gosh, when in doubt, check your hormones and do it right. Don't just check your hormones on any random day of your cycle, because every day is slightly different. So it's always important to have when you felt your best, because when you start having that transition phase, it's always nice to see, even if it's a 5-year difference, like, I feel amazing right now. Get your hormones checked, because it'll tell you when you feel your best. And then as you start changing, as you go to shifts in your hormone balance, then you can see what your body looked like before, and then of course thereafter. And you can always then we have a good starting place, honestly.
I love that. Very important. Yes.
Yep.
Anything else, Amanda?
I think that's it.
We're good.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much for being on the podcast and being here with our members today on Coffee with
Absolutely.
Coach. We appreciate you. Our clients, I know, are super grateful for the work that you and Dr. Wallace are doing. So I'm sure we'll have you on again. And
look forward to it.
yeah, you have a great day. And thank you everybody else who joined in as well.
Yes, thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah. All right, you guys have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome.